Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica, Imperialis and to today's video. Today is going to be my thoughts on Broken Realms, which is the upcoming Age of Sigmar plot arc, come expansion, I'm not really sure what to call it. They simply say that the Age of Sigmar will never be the same again. I talked about this in one of the recent previews, I think it was Shadow and Iron, where they first revealed the upcoming plot arc, but there is now a separate website for it as part of ageofsigmar.com, and there was also a bunch of reveals on there, as well as an absolutely amazing trailer that I wanted to talk about. Well, I want to talk about all of it really, since I've got a bit of space now outside of a preview review. So, for context, those who missed that preview, what is Broken Realms? I've tried to sum it up a little bit already, but Broken Realms is the next stage of the Age of Sigmar storyline, and it revolves around the character you can see on screen at the moment, Morathi, the leader of the Daughters of Khaine, and a demi-goddess of the elves of sorts who is striving to reach godhood. That is kind of the overarching plot thread of at least the first book in Broken Realms, and we learned that before. So this is the first book, telling the story of Morathi's aspirations to ascend to godhood and the lengths she will go to achieve her goal, with world-changing background and exclusive new rules for 5 of the featured factions, which is absolutely an interesting thing. Now, I know I'm biased on this one because I'm an Elves player. I think everyone's noticed that by now. And Daughters of Khaine were the first Elven faction that I probably got into because they were the first ones that got released. Morathi is a model I've owned pretty much as soon as I can get my hands on it. It's a lovely model. And much as she's evil and awful and horrible and you should hate her, she's an absolutely brilliant character in the plot. And I said at the time that I think this is the run-up to Age of Sigmar's 3rd edition, because we'll be coming up on 3 years in the summer. It'll be 3 years of AOS 2, so I think that once Broken Realms is done, we'll be getting AOS 3rd edition, but that's just my opinion. They launched the website with this amazing trailer. Unfortunately, my computer doesn't capture audio very well between the recording software and everything else, but give this trailer a watch because it is wonderful. You can find it on YouTube as well, on the Warhammer TV YouTube channel. It is a lovely solo monologue from Morathi over some frantic strings. I think it's violin, but I'm not a strings player, so I'm not sure. It is just a wonderful trailer that really hypes you up a little bit, and I really enjoyed it. But underneath, it talks about the featured factions. So this book has a focus on the Daughters of Khaine, Cities of Sigmar, Stormcast Eternals, Slaves to Darkness, and the Idoneth Deepkin. Now that's 4 Order factions and 1 Chaos faction. Yes, I agree, it doesn't push all of the Grand Alliances equally, and Order is getting all the time in the sun on this book. However, we don't know what is going to happen with future Broken Realms because they make it clear that this is book 1, and I think there'll probably be other features on different characters as part of the Broken Realms arc. It wouldn't surprise me if Nagash or one of the Mortarchs were to get one. There was a story today on Warhammer Community, the first of their Broken Realms shorts, which talked about a fight between Oryx and the coming of a god. So there may be something coming for Gordrak and the Great War, or the Big War in general. We don't know at this time. Yes, this book has a big Order push. I won't disagree, however. So, what do you actually get in this book, aside from all the fluff that we could speculate about? Well, the Daughters get the biggest push. They get a new temple, a new sub-faction, with allegiance abilities and warscroll battalions. So it's not the first time we've seen new allegiance abilities. They've been doing this in White Dwarf quite a lot, with things like Gloomspite, Ossiarch, Stormcast. They've had new allegiance abilities and battalions to go along with it within this new flavour. So whoever the Zainthar Kai Temple are, they're a temple I don't know from my reading of the Daughters of Khaine fluff. They're going to get some new stuff and some new unique warscroll battalions for themselves, which is an interesting development, alongside 2 warscrolls that let you use both versions of Morathi at the same time. So that means you could have Shadow Queen Morathi and High Oracle of Khaine Morathi at once. Okay. How? Why? What? So I'm guessing what's going to happen is that Morathi will do a ritual that separates her High Oracle form and her Shadow Queen form into separate entities, where the Shadow Queen becomes the god that is now venerated by the Khainites, whilst Morathi herself stays to play the role of the High Oracle, or something like that. Or maybe the other way around, Morathi becomes the god and leaves an avatar of herself as the High Oracle. I don't know, I don't get it. Elven magic is weird. But you can use both Morathis at once, which presents a really interesting gameplay challenge. Because one of the big things as a Daughters player is, if you're playing Morathi, when do you trigger her to go Shadow Queen? Do you send her Shadow Queen right away, knowing full well that you're giving up on her command abilities and her insane magic and all the other benefits she provides? Or do you keep it in High Oracle form and risk that the Shadow Queen form will either be heavily damaged or won't be able to pay its points back in the amount of stuff it can take out in the remaining time in the game? It's a really interesting balance for a Daughters player to strike, and being able to use both versions of Morathi at the same time is a little bit crazy, and I'm hoping that they balance the points accordingly, because to get the brute power of the Shadow Queen and all the buffs and magic of the High Oracle is scary. That's really scary. The cities of Sigmar is focused around Anvilgard, which is a city we haven't seen much of before. Hammerhall has had a fair bit of push as one of the first free cities ever founded. And obviously Gyron's had a fair bit of push around the War of Life, with the Living City, Greywater Fastness. But Anvilgard has generally, as a shady city not run by particularly humans, has generally stayed in the background, relatively speaking. It's got rules and all of that, and fluff in the city's battle tome, but it's never been the centerpiece for anything. Book 1 will give rules for the cities of Mistvan and Har-Curon, which is a very dark elven name, as well as a warscroll battalion for Drusa Kraith and her chosen warriors. We'll get to that battalion a little bit later on in the video. The Stormcast Eternals are led by the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, with 5 new warscroll battalions. 5. And 3 allegiance abilities. If you thought the Stormcast had a lot of options before, they've now got even more options. I already think they had the most options in any book, bar none, but now they've got 5 more battalions and 3 allegiance abilities coming. Good grief, that's a lot. Plus they also have a Hallowed Knights feature. In one White Dwarf, there was a Heldenhammer feature in another, a Hammers of Sigmar feature in another. Maybe that's what these 3 are. This is just taking the White Dwarf allegiance abilities and just wrapping them up. But these have all got a shared name, so I'm not really sure. It's interesting though, and hopefully this big push of Stormcast stuff is reflected in other factions too. The Slaves to Darkness get a warscroll battalion and 4 new allegiance abilities. So obviously Slaves to Darkness got a bunch of stuff in Wrath of the Everchosen, and these will not replace Wrath of the Everchosen, I don't think so anyway. So it would be interesting to see how these work, whether they're related to different factions within the Slaves to Darkness army list, or whether they're each one for a particular Chaos God. We don't know. And finally, the Idoneth get a battalion for the Bloodsurf Hunt and 4 updated war scrolls for the Alapex, which is the shark, the Leviathan, the turtle, and the Eidolons of Matlin, which is really, really interesting because they're rewriting war scrolls. They're doing this with Morathi as well, as I mentioned earlier, but they're rewriting war scrolls without actually redoing a battle tome. Because Idoneth have got all the things, aside from endless spells, that an AOS 2 faction has. They've got terrain, they've got all the extra abilities, they've got complex battalions, battle line if, and all of that. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the Idoneth book going forward, given that they've rewritten 4 war scrolls in here. But most interestingly, mount traits for deep mares and leviathans. Are we going to get to take like Achelian kings and queens on leviathans? Please, let it be so. I would be so down for an Achelian king or Achelian queen on Leviathan. Or maybe it will just be, oh hey, Leviathans get an extra bonus without changing fundamentally what they are, because that would require redoing the kit. It probably will just be, hey, you can give your Leviathan a boost like you can other mounts, but, you know, it would be cool to have princes and kings and queens on Leviathans. It really, really would. They then go into a bit more detail about the book and the factions. So, Morathi is book 1 in the Broken Realm series and tells the tale of the Shadow Queen's burning desire to attend to godhood, something we've known ever since she was revealed. After biding her time, her opportunities arrived, and she begins her final preparations for an arcane ritual. The Soul Wars are drawing to a head, with mighty battles across the mortal realms. So, whilst Morathi is the driving force of this book, it does suggest that the Soul Wars is really still raging on, and there'll be big battles going on that other books can focus on. Kind of less like the End Times, and more like Gathering Storm, if you will, where there were separate events taking place, and they all came to a head at the end. Kind of like the End Times as well, though I think it will be written better than both of those, hopefully, personally. We will see exactly what that entails going forward, but it's interesting that, obviously, whilst Morathi drives this book, she isn't driving the overarching narrative necessarily. She's just driving this book's narrative. With Allegiance abilities, War Scroll battalions, updated War Scrolls, and more besides, we've already mentioned that. We then get to see some of these battalions. Here we get to talk about Shadow and Pain, which is the box game that's being revealed around the same time. But they also show us some of the battalions that we're getting, or at least potential versions of them. So the Bloodsurf Hunt, the Royal Huntmaster of High King Volturnos, King Scythus Nematar of Priam. And it looks like you can take a battalion with an Achelian king and 2 Alapexes. And since the Alapexes are getting rewritten war scrolls, that could be actually pretty dangerous, as well as being pretty cheap. As a way to get a low model count battalion into your army is a good way for new players to experience battalions without having to shell out on giant piles of units like you do in an Idoneth army, where you need, I think the cheapest one in terms of unit count is the Royal Council, where you need 3 different heroes. But if you want a basic battalion, it's 4 units of Namarti or 5 different Achelian units. It's a bit silly. Gresh's Iron Reapers, it looks like it's a mix of Chaos Chariots. So you've got a Chaos Chariot Lord in the middle and 2 Gorbeast Chariots. So one of your charioteers becomes Rokar Gresh. Okay, so you really beef up your Master Charioteer in your unit, but it seems to be a chariot idea. So Chaos Chariot accompanied by a pair of champion charioteers, which look to be Gorbeasts, which is an interesting, and again, a small model count battalion. Van Breck's Black Watch is a Stormcast sharpshooter, which is a Lord Veritant, Griffhounds, and then Castigators, Judicators, and more Judicators. An outflanking battalion of snipers, and, you know, this could be quite powerful. I don't know how powerful it will be, because obviously it's a Griffhound tax and a Lord Veritant tax to take them. And Lord Veritants are nice but not spectacular. But being able to drop and outflank 2 units of Judicators and some Castigators, I don't know, it might be an interesting build for Stormcast players to look at as an alternate to the Vanguard Ultra Shootathon that I believe has become the power list of the day. And finally, is it finally? No. It's Kraith's Shadow Pact. This is the Cities of Sigmar one for Anvil Guard, and it's actually quite nice because the one downside with Cities of Sigmar is each of the city's battalions is thematic, but to the point of ridiculousness. Like, let me have a look at them. So, let's say you want to run the Anvil Guard battalion in Cities of Sigmar. That battalion mandates that you take pretty much the the Scourge Privateers. Like, it's a Fleetmaster, Corsairs, Scourge Runners, and a Charybdis. That's the battalion. So you're very locked in. So if you wanted to play Darkling Covens, Order Serpentis, actually Free Guild Guard don't get one. Like the basic Free Guild Guard don't have a battalion for them. There isn't particularly one for a variety of the different factions in there. Like the Dispossessed, I think, is mostly shown by their their artillery rather than anything else, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, I am remembering correctly. So it's nice to see other subgroups within the Cities of Sigmar pick up battalions. It's a shame we're only getting one, really, which appears to be a Sorceress on Dragon, and a unit of Bleak Sword / Dread Spears, and a unit of Dark Shards, so 2 units of basic Dark Elf infantry. Favoured thralls, as you will. So it's interesting, and I think it's a really good move to give more factions battalions and sub-factions so that people who want to play those armies thematically and get the gameplay benefits can do so. It's great to see. I just hope that we get more of it, because did we really need... How many battalions did the Stormcast get again? Was it 5? Did we really need 5 Stormcast battalions but only get 1 Cities battalion when Cities has far more factions? And did we only need 1 Chaos Chariot warscroll battalion, even if we're getting loads of Allegiance abilities? I feel like maybe the priority's gone in the wrong place, but it's still a good thing to see. They finally mentioned here, latest fiction. Yeah, we knew about that, and we're back to the beginning. And that actually is all of it for the website at this time. So I guess my thoughts on Broken Realms. Let's go find the coolest thing to look at. Here. We'll leave it there. My thoughts on Broken Realms. I am absolutely hyped up to no end about Broken Realms. And I know a chunk of that comes to the fact that I'm really a big fan of the Daughters of Khaine, the Idoneth Deepkin, and I have an investment in the Cities of Sigmar through the Darkling Covens and Order Serpentis. This is a lot of factions that I play and have a direct interest in their well-being when it comes to looking at new rules, new miniatures, and all of that. And the narrative is shaped around some of those characters that I really like as well, which again inclines me to like it. But if you think about the raw content that's in these books, so let's go over it again. If you add it all up, you get Allegiance ability, War Scroll battalions, a couple of new War Scrolls, 2 new Allegiance abilities there, a War Scroll battalion there, 5 battalions and 3 Allegiance abilities, 4 Allegiance abilities and a battalion and 4 new War Scrolls and some additional traits. The rules content of these books is actually quite dense for what is essentially an expansion book. Even comparing to, say, Wrath of the Everchosen, which focused on 2 factions. I mean, if we go into Wrath of the Everchosen, can I see it in my pile? Yes, I do. I've got it here. If I go into Wrath of the Everchosen and look at just how much was in there, as I recall, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, almost entirely Chaos Allegiance abilities. With, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 14 Allegiance abilities and 4 battalions within one of those Allegiance abilities, as well as Siege Warfare, Wandering Endless Spells, and the Roaming Monsters, most of which is narrative flavour rather than something that is used in competitive play. So, the actual content of the book is about 40% rules, but it's all for one faction. Wrath of the Everchosen was great lore-wise. I really enjoyed reading it lore-wise. But all the rules benefit one faction, or maybe two. Slays to Darkness, and there was some extra stuff tied up in there, I think, as I recall, for Bloodbound, Hedonites, Maggotkin, and Disciples as well. So it was 5 factions, but it was all 5 Chaos factions, and broadly they were all under one theme. These are more diverse, being shared across 5 very different factions, one of which is Chaos and 4 of which are Order, but most of which can't actually ally with each other. And it also promises different things. It's not just allegiance abilities and battalions. There's warscroll rewrites, there's new warscrolls in general, as well as a couple of other bits and bobs. And with the promise of more books along the way, that means that the other factions in the game will hopefully receive similar treatments. I think there will be one for Slaanesh, because I think that this Broken Realms arc will end in the liberation of Slaanesh. I do genuinely think that's where we're going, is the escape of Slaanesh that truly shatters the realms and leads to AOS 3. I think there's going to be something big involving the Forces of Destruction at this time, based on the story that I saw today on Warhammer Community. And there may be other stuff as well for Chaos, Death, and the other subgroups of destruction as well. So I think there's plenty to look forward to here in Broken Realms, and hopefully the amount of content that they're pushing per book continues at this sort of level. But what, of course, do you think? Are you looking forward to Broken Realms as an AOS player? Is the events that are unfolding here enough to interest you, particularly if you're someone who's more invested in Slaanesh, now that they're getting a box game and they might be getting out? Is this enough to draw you into the game? And what do you think about where they're going with the plot arc? I know it's obviously elves screwing each other over again. It's something that the elves do a lot. But just what do you think about it? Always interested to see what you have to say in the comments down below. In the meantime, though, thank you very much for watching. This has been Tactica Imperialis, and this has been my thoughts on Age of Sigmar Broken Realms, at least for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all again. Bye for now.